Hey guys, it's been a while since I made a games I played video, so here's one to start the year. This one's going to be horror game themed because of all the spooky games I played in 2024, especially since I've been streaming so much. I even started multi-streaming to both Twitch and YouTube, so you might find some of my playthroughs for these games on my YouTube channel. But anyway, I'll be making another games I played video right after this one, so I hope you look forward to it. Let's start off with the first game, Late Homework. I remember seeing the devs sharing this game on Twitter, and I thought it looked really good. It looked like an Animal Crossing style horror game, kinda like the short one that I streamed before called Rental. I was about to download the 3 version on itch.io when I discovered it, but I decided to wait for the Steam release since it was going to have more content, and it ended up being a great decision. So Late Homework is about Hanako, a girl who sneaks into her high school late at night because she forgot her assignments are due tomorrow morning. And, well, it doesn't end very well. She discovers that her school has some deep, dark secrets. The whole time I was playing through the intro of the game, I was like, Hanako, go home please. Because there were so many red flags the moment she arrived there. But then the story wouldn't exist if she decided to leave that day. Anyway, Late Homework is basically if Animal Crossing had a Silent Hill style game. It has fixed camera angles with environments that are oozing with that old school survival horror atmosphere. So while exploring, you'll be reading notes and picking up items that'll be useful for puzzles and progression, though the game also has a little bit of Slender Man in it, since it has that mechanic where you have to find all 10 pages of your homework before you can go home. I don't want to spoil or talk too much about the game since it takes a little over an hour to finish, but let's just say that it becomes more challenging the more pages you collect. I normally don't like this mechanic because it's overused in a lot of indie horror games since Slender Man, but I'd say that Late Homework does it very well, especially since it's not the only focus of the game. It's 90% more Silent Hill, from the way the environments look to even the maps. I had so much fun playing it because it had pretty good pacing, and it was just a genuinely enjoyable survival horror game. I love that it managed to be scary too, even with its adorable protagonist. Oh, and if the game seems too short for you, it has a lot of unlockable outfits and achievements to get after your first playthrough, but I personally thought that the game's great, so I was satisfied with just one playthrough. If you want to check it out, Late Homework is on Steam, and it's really cheap. The next one is The Bridge Curse 2, Extrication. I tried playing The Bridge Curse 1 back when I started streaming, but I didn't like it. It was just too janky and uninteresting, so I ended up refunding the game. Fast forward to 2024, and I noticed that The Bridge Curse 2 was out. It looked better than the first, and it's a standalone story, despite being the second game in the series. I ended up getting a key from their publisher P-Cube so that I could stream the game, and I had so much fun. The Bridge Curse 2 has you exploring Wenhua University, which is renowned in Taiwan for its ghost tales and folklore. And you basically play as the students of a film club who plan on digging up their school's mysteries to create a viral horror movie. And as the usual horror story goes, things go south real quick. The Bridge Curse 2 is very story heavy, so it has a lot of cutscenes and dialogue. You even end up playing as multiple characters throughout the game, experiencing the story through their perspective. So yeah, I won't be talking about the story for too long, especially since it takes a little over 5 hours to complete. It just has lots of occult themes and Taiwanese folklore. I personally loved seeing the characters interact, even with the corny dialogue. Like, it's been a few months since I played the game, but I still remember them using outdated slang words that made the conversations so much worse. But I got invested in the story and the characters, so I ended up excusing their cringe most of the time. Now for the gameplay, it's a first-person game where you explore and complete objectives by finding the right items and solving puzzles in order to progress through the game. Oh, and occasionally running away from ghosts. Standard horror game stuff, really. But what separates it from other indie horror games that I've played is just how creative the gameplay and the ghosts were later on. Like, it was incredible being able to experience all the different scene transitions later on, along with how you end up dealing with the enemies, and I'd say the game is worth a playthrough just for the ballerina ghost alone. I was both terrified and intrigued when I encountered her in the game. I wish I could say more, but it's best experienced if you play it yourself. So yeah, I recommend The Bridge Curse 2 if you're interested in a short but great horror game. I'd say it's still underrated and relatively unknown. I wouldn't be surprised if it's also because the game has 2 in the title, so some people who've come across it might immediately think they have to play the first one. I assure you that you don't need to, and it helps that the story, characters, graphics, and gameplay are even better here. I'm hoping we get The Bridge Curse 3 in the future as well, since I feel like the devs will just keep improving after this. The Bridge Curse 2 is out on all platforms. The third game is Blair Witch. I played through Silent Hill 2 Remake when it released, and I absolutely loved it. I was also in shock since, well, Bloober Team did the remake justice, despite releasing games that are mid. I thought maybe I just missed out on some hidden gems from their projects, so I decided to try Blair Witch, since that was the last game they made before Silent Hill 2, if you exclude the Layers of Fear remake. It ended up being above average, actually. So Blair Witch has you playing as a former police officer who's searching for a young boy that disappeared in a forest. As you go further into your investigation, you end up encountering a mysterious force that haunts the woods, and things end up turning into a nightmare. Blair Witch is based on the lore of the Blair Witch Project movie, which I think I watched a long time ago, but I don't really remember it much. But anyway, the game plays kinda like a walking simulator mixed with the old survival horror game Haunting Ground. And the reason why I mention Haunting Ground is because you have a pet dog in this game, and you basically use him to sniff out items and lead the way. The fact that you can customize him to be a white German Shepherd, just like Huey, makes me feel like it's more than just a coincidence. I thought that the overall game was fun, but I did get frustrated with how often I'd get lost in the game's forest. Like, the game's quite linear, but there were areas where it was very easy to circle around because I didn't notice that there was a different pathway. But other than that, I don't really have much to say about the game. I think it was a good short horror game that can be finished in over 5 hours. I mostly just like that the game showcased Bloober Team's talent when it comes to creating horror game environments, and I like that it felt like it had a bit of the formula that led to them doing a very good job with remaking Silent Hill 2. I recommend Blair Witch if you want to play through a decent horror game with a cute puppy by your side. I think the game's out on every platform as well, so do check it out. Next up is Choo Charles. I remember seeing this game trending a couple of years ago, and I was confused but intrigued. It looked like a horror game version of Thomas the Tank Engine, which felt very fitting since I've always thought that Thomas was creepy when I was a kid. But yeah, I decided to try it out in my Halloween stream, and the game ended up being one of the most unique horror titles that I've ever played, though I'd say that the game is more funny than scary most of the time. So Choo Charles has you playing as a guy who visits an island that's being terrorized by a killer spider train. Defeating him is not easy though, since he runs away every time he takes too much damage, so you'll have to find his eggs throughout the island, which you can then use to summon him for an epic boss battle. I didn't really pay attention to the story too much when I played it, but that's the story in a nutshell, I think. What surprised me the most about Choo Charles is that it's an open world game with a twist. The island is huge, not to mention that Charles is on the loose, so you can't just go on foot. You'll be driving your very own train in order to traverse through the whole place, and on top of that, you can use scraps to upgrade it and equip powerful weapons that can be used against Charles. I initially wanted to play this game because of its killer Thomas the Tank Engine premise, but I completely forgot about it because the game became so addicting. Like, you can do a bunch of silly side quests across the map that reward you with scraps, and the whole gameplay loop of upgrading your train and fighting off Charles whenever he appeared became very addicting. The fact that the game's about 3 hours long made it even better, since I felt like it didn't overstay its welcome. It was just a fun game from start to finish. I think my only complaint about it is, since it's more silly than scary, Charles wasn't really a massive threat until the end. I think there should have been more interesting encounters with him to increase the horror factor of the game. But despite that, I still recommend Choo Charles if you want to try a very unique horror game. If you want to try it yourself, the game's out on every platform. The 5th game I've played is The Medium, or should I say the Midium. Yeah, I'm not going to hide it, this game is mid. I was thinking about trying this game around the time I started playing Blair Witch, since both games were made by Bloober Team, and I remember seeing gameplay footage of The Medium and thinking that the split-screen looking gameplay was interesting. Unfortunately, the story wasn't very good, but I thought that the gameplay was decent at least. The Medium has you playing as Marianne, a medium that sends souls off when they're stuck in something like purgatory? I forgot what it was, but it's some kind of spirit realm that's between the real world and heaven. But anyway, she ends up going to an abandoned resort to discover the origin of her powers, I think. But yeah, I mostly enjoyed The Medium for its gameplay. It has a lot of fixed camera angles and a lot of the puzzle solving and exploration mechanics of Silent Hill 2 Remake. So just like Blair Witch, I thought it was very interesting to play through the game because it felt like I was witnessing the origins of SH2's formula. Now what makes The Medium very different from similar games is that it has a gimmick. Marianne can see and interact with both the real world and the spirit realm, so whenever this happens, the game would turn into a split-screen experience so you can navigate through both places. It doesn't mean that you can always control her separately though. You're basically just walking through the same level but with a different appearance, along with various puzzles and environments, so if you can't progress through one world, you'll need to find a way through in the other. But yeah, as interesting as it is, I say that it's a gimmick for a reason. Like, I find the split-screen cutscenes to be very unnecessary most of the time. A lot of the important events were happening in the spirit realm instead of the real world, so if Marianne was talking to a spirit on the top part of the screen, for example, it's useless watching the bottom half since she'll look like she's talking to nothing. It doesn't help that the story wasn't engaging for the most part, so the game felt like it was trying too hard to be cinematic. It took me a little over 9 hours to complete it though, so it wasn't too bad, but I don't think I can recommend the Medium. Like, comparing this to Blair Witch, I'd say that this is slightly worse. Though if you want to play it for the puzzles, I'd say it's an okay experience. The Medium is out on PC, Xbox Series X, and the PS5. The next game is Tormented Souls. I wasn't too interested in this game, to be honest, especially when I saw some clips of it a couple of years ago. There were just too many indie survival horror games coming out, so I wasn't sure if this was going to be any better. But I decided to try it out since it was recommended to me by you guys. I received a key from their publisher P-Cube, and the game exceeded my expectations, even though the game had some old school frustrations. Tormented Souls is about Carolyn, a girl who goes to a mysterious mansion in order to investigate the disappearance of twin girls. After getting knocked out, she wakes up in the middle of the night only to discover that she's naked and hooked up to medical equipment. Oh, and her right eye is missing. She then continues her investigation and finds some pretty disturbing things about the mansion. As soon as I gained control of Carolyn, I had a feeling that I was going to like the game. The visuals alone were beautiful. It gave the game a very atmospheric and Resident Evil look. It helps that it has fixed camera angles and janky combat too, just like the old school survival horror games. I also liked how the inventory system worked. It had this sort of point and click mechanic, where you had to select the items and objects that you wanted to interact with. It made things feel tangible, especially when you're solving puzzles. Now the thing about this game is, It's hard. The game makes use of film, kinda like the ink ribbons for Resident Evil 1 to 3's typewriters, so you can only save if you have film to insert into audio recorders in the save rooms. Because of this, the first few hours of the game was rough. I had a hard time dealing with enemies roaming around in small rooms and narrow hallways, because the combat was janky, and it doesn't help that healing items were scarce, so I couldn't just save anytime. Whenever I died, I'd have to play through entire sections of the game until I found more film. It got better later on, but I still had to plan it out every time I wanted to save. And the puzzles, oh god, the puzzles. They had this obscure, old-school difficulty to them. I had to pull up a guide every now and then, but despite all that, I had a lot of fun playing through Tormented Souls. It's immersive, terrifying, and the story was genuinely interesting throughout my 13-hour playthrough. But I can only recommend this game to people who don't mind the old-school nature and difficulty of the game. I think that everyone else who plays it will have a frustrating time. Still, I'm excited for Tormented Souls 2 later this year. Tormented Souls is out on every platform. The last game is Crow Country. I actually played through the demo of this game and talked about it in one of my older games I played videos. The reason why it caught my interest was because of its Final Fantasy VII-like art style, mixed with old-school survival horror gameplay. I thought it had so much potential, so I'm happy that the full game ended up being really good. Crow Country is about Mara Forrest, a special agent who decides to investigate Crow Country, an abandoned theme park located in a rural area. She goes there in search of its founder, Edward Crow, who mysteriously disappeared after the place shut down. From there, she starts uncovering the park's history while encountering some messed up creatures. Crow Country plays kinda like the old school Resident Evil games, so you'll be going around the theme park, acquiring key items, solving puzzles, and fighting hideous puppet-like monsters along the way. The game had such a unique style to it, so it was awesome just exploring and interacting with the environment. Like, I loved being able to spin the camera around to view everything in detail. Even though Crow Country is a survival horror game, it doesn't really feel like it most of the time, and that's because the game's pretty easy. I never really felt like I was running out of bullets or healing items, and I rarely had a hard time with the bosses. This was on the game's default difficulty setting, by the way, which is literally named Survival Horror. Maybe hard mode would have felt better, but yeah, it didn't bother me too much since I was having a lot of fun with the game. And the story gripped me in the last half because of all the revelations. It was genuinely mind-blowing. I'm glad that the game had a pretty decent playtime as well, but I did get stuck on a few puzzles and a little lost, so it took me almost 13 hours to beat the whole game. It was a great experience though, and I highly recommend it. Crow Country's out on every platform. Let me know what you thought about the video, and like and subscribe if you liked my content. Thank you to my patrons at Patreon for supporting my channel. Horror games I played video done. Now I'll work on the next normal or, well, varied games I played video. So yeah, you guys are gonna get another one soon. I hope you guys look forward to it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.